Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of our Justice and Peace's guest speaker series as we are interviewing paralegal and lawyer bencher candidates. As always, the views are of the candidates alone and they don't reflect me, Justice and Peace's, Trials College, or any other education institution or organization that I'm affiliated with. As well, actually, pretty fitting though, but I would wish everyone a happy Nowruz for those that are celebrating. And I'm really happy to have Sayeh on here joining us. Again, happy Nowruz to you.
Thank
And
you.
perhaps maybe you can tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. I'll tell you a little bit and the viewers about me, and then I'll tell you a little bit about why I'm running for bencher. I think my background comes into play, and so that's what I'd like to start with. I am originally from Iran. I was born in Iran. My family had to flee Iran when I was 7 years old. We lived in Turkey for 5 years as refugees, and then we were finally able to come to Canada when I was 13. And one of the things that I loved about Canada was the freedom of speech, freedom of expression. And when I was in high school, I think I learned about the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And I thought that was absolutely the most amazing thing that was available to people, a tool that would protect people against the government. And it was really important to me personally because where I come from in Iran, there is no such a thing. And if anybody is following the news right now, you'll see even in the last 40 years, there's no civil liberties, no human rights, rule of law is not respected, citizens are not protected against the government. And so when I found out about this incredible tool, the charter, I thought, I want to be a lawyer and I want to use this Charter of Rights and Freedoms to defend people and to serve people and to protect them against the government, which is what led me to becoming a lawyer. And a little bit about also when my family came here and going through law school, it was difficult for me because my family was, in terms of economics, we were a very low income family. So it was difficult going through university. And then when I decided that I wanted to do law school, I knew that the only way that I could actually afford to go to law school was if I stayed at home. I lived in Ottawa at the time. If I stayed at home and then if I went to Ottawa University so that I would only pay for law school fees. And luckily I got into Ottawa University. I had an early acceptance, which was probably one of the happiest days of my life. And I became a lawyer. And I really wanted to, like I said, do something that had to do with the charter, which is why I went into criminal defense. I articled with Walter Fox in Toronto, who was a very experienced lawyer when I started with him. He's now retired. I stayed with him and I practiced with him for almost 14 years. And 2 years ago, I started doing charter advocacy and charter litigation, again, using the charter to protect the rights of individuals against the government, which I think it's very important. So that's a little bit about me. And then I can go into why I've decided to run for bencher. And that started about 4 years ago with the statement of principles. The statement of principles was something that I was very concerned about, again, because my family fled Iran because my parents didn't want us to grow up in a country where we couldn't speak our mind, where we didn't have a freedom of expression, where the government was telling us what we could think, what we could say, what we could do. And so we came to Canada, a free country. I became a lawyer because I wanted to defend people and protect people. And then I see that the Law Society, who has power over my license, my livelihood, is now compelling speech, telling me what I have to think. And I have to put what they're asking me in writing and put it down. And that did not sit right with me at all, because I felt like if I went along with that, every sacrifice that my parents had made to bring me to Canada would have completely been wasted. And so that was a big concern. I never did a statement of principles. I said no on the filing on my yearly report. And I think we had to do that 2 times before the election, if my memory serves me correctly. And so I was a big supporter of the Stop Stop team. I thought what they were doing was very important because as lawyers and as Canadians, it's really, really important for us to be able to think independently and be independent. So the Stop Stop team won, and we no longer had to deal with the statement of principles. I thought that would be the end of it. But then the last 4 years, I keep seeing things that have nothing to do with the Law Society mandate creep into the profession, the Law Society, the politicization of the Law Society, the fact that the focus is no longer on competence as it should be, in my opinion, because that is how we serve the public. And that's why I decided that I would run and that I would run with the Full Stop team because I think these are very important issues that our profession faces right now.
All right. So you mentioned the statement of principles, and the statement of principles is no more. So what is, in terms of the next steps, right? You mentioned in terms of getting back to competencies. What are some of the things then that we can look at in terms of the statement of principles are out, but what else kind of needs to be changed?
I'm going to speak just about some very recent things that I've seen on the internet, because I know that the coalition has talked about how, statement of principles is gone. We don't have to worry about it and let's move on. But then I look at social media and I look at how some of the members, not everyone, but some of the people in the coalition and some of their supporters are carrying out personal attacks on Full Stop candidates based on their opinion, based on their political leanings, based on their personal views. And this is being used in an attempt to cancel candidates because of what they believe, because of what their political views are. And that is concerning to me because I don't think that should play any role in whether you're a competent individual, whether you should be able to run for bencher or not. And it should have no role in your role as a bencher, because if you're a bencher, the Law Society, its mandate is to ensure competence. And competence means you know what you're doing, you're a good lawyer, you're a solid lawyer, you know the law, you're representing your client in a competence matter. But that seems, I haven't heard the word competence a lot. What I have heard and what I'm seeing a lot on social media as well, if this is your political leaning, that makes you a racist and you're incompetent because this is your point of view and you don't agree with the establishment, therefore you're not acceptable. And that makes me think that if this is the point of view right now, when none of these individuals have any power over my license or the license of other candidates, what will happen if they do have that power over my license? Am I going to be canceled? Am I going to lose my license? Am I going to be forced into re-education because I do not aspire to, or I don't believe in the same things, or I have a different political leaning, or I have a different opinion about something? So that is the concern. We all need to be independent, and none of us should fear speaking freely and thinking freely. We should not fear that, and we should not feel constantly concerned about losing our license or being forced into re-education because we have different opinions or point of views. I mean, talk about diversity. I think it's very important to have diverse opinions and to be able to have respectful discussions about diverse opinions without personally attacking any individuals.
Now you brought up diversity there. I know I can't remember the exact wording, but certainly from the other side, they point to the lack of diversity on the Full Stop team, right? And I know, and obviously, I'm talking to you, and I'm going to talk to some other members, I hope, and hopefully all of the members, just so we can hear from everyone. But I know you just had a video I was watching about maybe it's not reflective of just who ends up stepping forward and announcing that they're going to run, but you've heard from other people and they've expressed support. But what, as you were mentioning, there's sort of this cancel culture there. What sort of barriers then that create in terms of the makeup there for who's ending up running on the Full Stop group?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because from the one end, they say, well, there isn't enough diversity. On the other end, again, when you look at Twitter and you look at social media and you look at the systematic attempt to cancel individuals that are running with the team, it's a concern. And I mentioned that in a video, and there were comments that were made about what I said, that maybe what I'm saying is not true. But I can assure you, I know two people personally, good friends of mine, two females in the first 5 year of their practice, both again minorities, but they were too afraid of being canceled. They're just starting their career, they're not fully established, and they do not want to be blacklisted moving forward with their careers. So they said, yeah, we support you, but we cannot come forward because of this. And I totally understand that. I think it's very difficult when you're facing personal attacks for, standing up for what you believe in, and it's totally unnecessary. I think we can disagree. We're all lawyers, we all know about, being civil and rules of professional conduct, and there's no reason why we can't be civil and we can't be respectful and also disagree. That's what diversity is to me.
Now, certainly one of the messaging there is, the Law Society has lost its way. So we've talked about getting back to competencies. What else in terms of ways that the Law Society has strayed besides what we've already addressed?
And I want to make it clear, I'm here speaking on my own behalf because we have a lot of diversity on the full staff team, and people don't necessarily agree with everything. We all have diverse point of views. So I'm here to talk about what I think is important. And for me, one of the major issues is the bloat and the Law Society budget. Coming from, again, a family, very low income family, very difficult to get through law school. First of all, let's start with the articling fees. Because when I started articling, thankfully, I did not have to pay articling fees. And if I had to, I have no idea how I would have managed to do that, because it was just not within my means to pay articling fees. And it is shocking to me right now that in the past, I think it's the past 8 years, if I'm not mistaken, it might be a bit more, people have to pay for articling. How is that inclusive? I mean, this to me is a huge barrier to entrance into our profession. And it will only impact people who come from low income families and low income situations. So if we want to talk about diversity, if we want to talk about inclusion, that law, the articling fees, it has to go. For me, that is one of my main concerns. I've spoken to so many students. I do a lot of mentorship. I'm very involved with mentorship programs. And I know how difficult it is for articling students from all walks of life when they come from low-income families. It's debilitating. So that, to me, it has to go. It's a very big concern of mine. And then, of course, the fees. The fees are really high. And the budget, Law Society's budget, I'm not a bencher, but I understand it's over $100 million. And I want to be very clear, because there's been a lot of talk about the libraries and support for the libraries. And as a criminal defense lawyer, I have used the libraries, the Osgood Library and the Toronto Lawyers Association, the one that's run in the Superior Court in Toronto, all the time. I used to go there probably on a weekly basis. I think those libraries are essential to sole practitioners, to newly called lawyers, to articling students, small firms who can't afford the subscription for Westlaw and Quick Law. So to me, the libraries are absolutely essential. I do not think that any funding should be taken away from the libraries. And I want to make that very clear, because I use that. I don't use it as much anymore since I've started doing constitutional law, but absolutely essential. And I was actually a member of board of directors of Toronto Lawyers Association, which runs the library at the Superior Court. And I can tell you the staff there are incredibly knowledgeable, supportive, efficient. They're absolutely wonderful. And so those libraries are necessary, in my opinion. I fully support funding for the libraries. So where then can we look at, where do we do the cutting? Because it's a huge budget. And again, I'm not a bencher yet, but some of the thoughts that I have are if you have $1 million budget, there's probably efficiencies and there are probably inefficiencies. And so we need to look at the budget carefully, and perhaps there needs to be a neutral party who comes in and looks at the budget and can point out, okay, so these are some things that are maybe not as efficient. Can we make some changes here? And can we make some changes there? I think there's a lot of potential. I think we need to look at things very carefully. But there are certain things that are absolutely essential, in my opinion, like the libraries, that the full funding to that is something that I support fully.
Now you brought it up, right? I mean, I think it's very provocative. It gets the people going. Stop bloat, stop creep, stop woke. So let's maybe move on to the creep part, right? In terms of what is the role essentially of the Law Society, or what do you see the role, if you're elected as bencher, of what they should be doing for us in our profession, and what should they not be doing?
So what I see and what I understand, the mandate of the Law Society is that it's competence. It's serving the public. And so how do we serve the public? We serve the public by being competent lawyers. Again, I've defended, countless individuals who have been charged with criminal offenses, and now I do constitutional law pro bono. How do I do that? By being a competent lawyer. It's interesting because when you're defending someone who's charged with a criminal offense and they're facing jail time, the only thing that they care about is, first of all, can I afford you? Can I afford the lawyer? And second of all, do you know what you're doing? Have you done this before? Are you going to be able to help me and represent me competently? Those are the two issues that will come up when you're doing criminal law. That's been my experience. In this election and in the last so many years, I haven't heard a lot about competence, which concerns me, because that is the way that we can serve the public. We have to make sure we're giving competent representation to individuals. And as part of that, I think is, we have a lot of solo practitioners. We have a lot of people who are newly called. And I don't think there's enough supports available at the Law Society for these individuals. So when you're starting out, you might not, you don't have the experience, you might have some difficulties, and you need to have a place where you can go to for support and for help, so that a small problem doesn't end up becoming a huge problem where you've now haven't served your client properly and you're going to be disciplined. So one of the things that I'm very passionate about and I've been doing for, the last 5-6 years is mentorship. And I do that through, programs that are available, and also just in an unstructured way with people that need it, with lawyers. And the Law Society does have one program, the CAN Coach program, that I'm involved with. And I think that's a good start, but it's not enough. We can do so much more. And I think that's really important, to make sure we have competent lawyers who have the support that they need to serve the public.
And then I guess we can go to the last pillar there, which is stop woke. And you were talking a lot about competence and being a criminal defense lawyer, and whether certainly books on bail and GLADU factors, right, where we look at kind of cultural competence, right, the importance of knowing your client and advocating in there. So does that kind of is that something that needs to be coming from the Law Society in terms of better understanding, or is that something maybe in terms of, I mean, I'll leave it to you to maybe explain sort of what stop woke means, but maybe it should be coming from elsewhere. I don't know, but I'll leave that to you there and to address. So
the woke is one of those words that I think there are a lot of definitions for it. And I've seen it also weaponized a lot in the last so many years. But to me, stop woke means, again, let's go back to the roots. Let's go back to competence. And yeah, I agree with you. There are circumstances, for example, the GLADU court, where you have to know, but again, it's very law-based. So we have a whole body of law on GLADU. And so, these are the factors that we need to look at. And this is, the case law that supports it. And this is how we do the reports. So you have to be competent in the law. You have to know the back, where's the history, where does it come from? How do I move forward? And you have the same situation. For example, I've defended a lot of clients who had mental health problems. They were dealing with alcoholism, addiction. And a lot of these people don't really have family support because of their addiction, their mental health. They don't have a lot of support in the community. So you're there, you're helping, you're serving, and you're doing your best. I definitely think it's important to take those things into consideration. But again, focus is it's real. That's part of competence. So, for example, if I'm working with a client who has serious mental health problems, and I have to, but he's competent, and I have to help him give his evidence in court. That goes to my competence. How much time do I spend with this client? How many times did we go over his version of the event? What kind of questions do I ask him? So that to me, it all comes down to competence, to spending the time that you need, to knowing the law, learning about your client, putting all of that together to make sure that you present a competence defense, because that's the best way that we can serve our clients.
And though, so then in terms of kind of going back to sort of the stop woke, what should the law society not be kind of concerning themselves with in terms of, I know we kind of talked to maybe a little bit on the bloat and the creep, but what should they be, if they're focusing on competence and knowing the law and knowing all of this and better preparing, especially young and new lawyers, as you're mentioning, the coach and advisory network, where can they sort of distance themselves from what they're currently doing to focus more on these areas?
I think less of politicizing the law society and more focus on competence. Again, I have not heard a lot about competence. I haven't heard the word used, the competence, not very often in other campaigns and from the coalition ventures. I think let's focus on competence. That's how we can serve the public. That's how we can serve the clients. And that's my opinion.
Now, in terms of, the election, right, and it's possible we could have, a situation like the last time where there's some members of the full stop group elected. It's possible this time there may be some members of the coalition elected. And as you're pointing out, both sides are saying, hey, the other people are being uncivil, right? And then come May the 1st, the results will be out, and there could be, and of course, I'd also be amiss without mentioning there's a number of independent candidates that I'm hoping to speak with as well and have scheduled, that any combination of these groups and individuals will form our board of directors, our benchers, right? 40 lawyers, 5 paralegal candidates. There'll be 8 appointed from the public. But how do we kind of get all together and sort of move on, regardless of the makeup, in terms of doing what the law society needs to be doing?
Well, I think that goes to our goal, which I think is serving the community, serving the public, serving the profession. And if that's the goal, then we should all be able to come together. Like I said, in a civil manner, it's okay to disagree. And I think it's important to disagree. I think it's important to have a diversity of opinion and to have those discussions. I mean, that's the benefit of working and living in a free and democratic society, is that we can be diverse and we can have different opinions and we can discuss them in a respectful manner. There's no reason for personal attacks. It's absolutely unnecessary. I think let's challenge the ideas, but be respectful of the people.
The last couple of questions here, as you know from speaking to my students, I think it's about 2 years ago. It feels like these all flow together over the time. But for my students that are listening, and certainly, and I will say that I still, in my criminal class, they still have to watch the video from when you came the last time. It's one of the things that's in the syllabus there, so it's constantly helpful for me. But any further advice you have for paralegal students or any students that are listening as they look to get into the profession? I know you were talking about articling and fees. Any advice you can offer to them? Any words of wisdom?
I think it's really important to build connections, because that's really, and especially once you get into the profession, you really want to have that support. So I highly, highly recommend that you build a little network of people that you can go to both in good times and in bad times, where you can discuss the law, you can get advice from. And I find personally, especially the criminal bar, it's relatively small and everybody is quite engaging and supportive and helpful. So if anybody comes to me, I've never turned anyone down. If you want to have a coffee, if you want to have a discussion, but I think it's really important to have that supportive group of people that you can go to, so that you don't find yourself alone, and struggling. So that would be my number one advice, is to build a group of people that you can go to and have that community.
Perfect. So once again, thanks so much for taking the time and joining us. The last question, most important one maybe for all the lawyers that may be watching this, and like myself, I do get to vote. I have 40 votes, right? So why should one of those votes go to you?
um, why should That's a very good question, and I think it's very humbling to ask for the vote. I can tell you, and I can promise you, I have in the last 16 years used dedication, passion, and everything that I had really to defend my clients, to serve the public. And I've also done that throughout the profession with the mentorship that I've done. I think that I'm very sincere about it. I really sincerely believe in serving and helping, and that's why I'm here. That's why I've chosen the path that I have. And I can promise you that if you give me your vote, I will use the same dedication and the same passion that I have to further what we've discussed here today. And my number one goal is to make this profession more accessible for those who are economically challenged and who may feel like they cannot find their way into this profession. I think that's really important, and that's what I want to work towards, and that's what I'm here. So I would be very humbled to have your vote. Thank you.
Thank you once again. Happy New Year once again. And thanks
Thank
for everyone for
you.
tuning in. Take care.
Thank you so much.